morning or good afternoon, depending on whether you're joining from the UK or elsewhere. Just to welcome you to this webinar. People are still joining, but it is 31 past, so let's get going. I'm Professor Susan Mickey, co-director of Behavioural Research UK and director of the Centre for Behaviour Change at UCL. I'm going to chair today's session. Today's session, as I think everybody knows, is a really important session. It's a consultation session on a draft document that we've produced that is a statement on the use of AI in behavioural research, and very importantly, both effective and responsible use of AI in behavioural research. I want to start off with just a few words about the background to this statement. This is very much in response to requests from the field. We've been developing this statement informed by a literature review, looking at other guidance documents, and also expert review of various drafts. And it sets out our position on the use of generative AI in behavioural research, centred on a human-in-the-loop approach and the need for rigorous evaluation. Obviously, quite a lot of what is in this document is relevant to research more generally, but we have tried to pull out areas where specific things need to be thought about in relation to human behaviour. And so if you see gaps and think of things that we haven't covered, then we'd love to hear about that. And this consultation, 90 minutes, the time we'll have together here, is a really important part of the process for developing this draft into a final version. And you've got several ways in which you can contribute. We'll have a transcript of the session, so both in terms of what you say, also in terms of what you put on the chat, and at the end we'll have a Padlet for people to be able to put information on to that. And we really welcome your views, your comments, your feedback on the statement. So this will be 90 minutes long. We'll have an introduction. We have a slide up here. We'll have an introduction, a presentation, followed by time for some Q&As, and then another short presentation of a tool that's been inspired by the work in developing this statement. So a few housekeeping notes up here. As I said, please submit any questions or comments via the chat box. And if there are questions for particular panelists, who I'll introduce in a moment, please make that clear. If you require closed captions but can't see it on your screen, please click the CC box on your Zoom menu bar. And importantly, we're going to record this because obviously we want to record all your comments. The recording will just feature the slides presented and the audio of the presenter. But if you, during the Q&A session, if you switch on your camera and audio, this will also be recorded. So if for any reason you don't want your face recorded, then don't switch on your camera. Okay, so we have today presenting this statement, Maggie Yang and Amy Roger, and then Marika Chimeras, who's Vice President of the Busara, is going to talk about a tool they've developed. And then on the panel, as well as me, we have Professor Liam Delaney from the Department for Psychological and Behavioural Science at LSE, and Robert West, who's Professor Emeritus of Health Psychology at University College London. Next. Okay, so in terms of what we're going to cover, I'm doing the introduction, then we'll have the overview of the statement, direct Q&A, so do put those into the chat if you'd like them picked up, or put your digital hand up, but there's quite a lot of people on here, so I may not see you. We'll have a panel discussion, and then, sorry, Marika Chimeras will present on transparency in AI, then we'll have the discussion and your feedback. Okay, so here is a statement. So anybody who hasn't got the statement in front of them, hasn't read it and would like to do so, here's a QR code. So I'll just give you time to take a snapshot of that. And it'll come up at the end again too. Next. Okay, and now I think I hand over to Maggie. Is it Maggie who's going to present this first bit? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Susan. I'm Maggie, the BR UK Research Fellow at UCL Center for Behavior Change. And today, together with Amy, we will cover the background to the statement, the methods we used, our 4 key stances, and the recommendations for different stakeholder groups. And then we will open the floor for your feedback. So here on this slide, you can see that generative AI is already inside our many research workflows. Researchers are using it for literature review, study design, data analysis, writing, and to also develop and evaluate tailored adaptive interventions. For instance, it's helping us to become more efficient and can brainstorm more new ideas. And this figure summarizes the benefits people point to. Next. In the meantime, the evidence on those benefits is actually genuinely mixed, and there are also many core challenges we are facing. The models are usually trained on skewed data, so they can perpetuate stereotypes and underrepresent global perspectives. They also raise new ethical questions about plagiarism, data privacy, and disclosure. And there are other broader concerns such as skills erosion in researchers, declining public trust in science, and the environmental footprint of these systems. And we are already seeing both responsible and irresponsible practice, including papers published with AI-generated fake references. And that gap is what made a statement necessary. Next. So before going straight into the statement, 2 definitions will anchor everything that follows. So by effective, we mean high quality, rigorous, efficient, and having reach. And by efficiency alone isn't the win. And by responsible, we mean upholding integrity, protecting the participants, and mitigating risks. And we use generative AI as an umbrella term from general purpose tools like ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini to research specific tools like Elicit and Undermined. And we use it for accessibility purpose, not because it's a precise term. And this term is actually also very contested at the moment. Next, please. So how do we get here? As Susan briefly mentioned just now, the development process involves several steps. Step 1, we did an AI-assisted review of existing guidelines, frameworks, and peer-reviewed literature. We used Manus AI for gray literature and cross-verified this with Claude Opus 4 and Perplexity, plus targeted Google Scholar searches. And the outputs are all on OSF, the Open Science Framework. And step 2 is a steering group of behavioral researchers and research users across academia, the civil service, and industry that shaped the material into an initial draft. And step 3, we have feedback from our BRUK colleagues, which sharpened the stances and recommendations. And now, step 4, we are here with a consultation within the behavioral research community. And then the next step, since this is going to be a living statement, we will review and update this annually for the duration of BRUK. And now I will pass to Amy to give you an overview of the stances.
Thank you, Maggie. So I'm going to start with the 4 stances that we've come up for the statement on responsible and effective AI use in research. If we can go to the next slide, we'll see stance 1, which is on the fact that research ethics and integrity principles must include AI concerns. And this is because AI raises novel issues that demand a thorough understanding of how to apply the existing principles that we all use in practice now that AI is being involved in our work. And we've identified 6 principles from existing guidance and emerging global consensus. And I'm going to really briefly go over them now, but you can see them in more detail in the statement. The first is human oversight and accountability, addressing the fact that only humans can be held responsible for the research process and its outputs. Transparency and disclosure, which calls for the need to document and disclose intentional and substantial AI use. And there's a section in the appendix of the statement covering what we mean by that. Also around AI risk mitigation, which involves the need to not only identify, though, mitigate the biases that come with using these models, as well as deal with issues around things like protecting sensitive data. So that's the first 3 principles, and if we can go to the next slide, we'll see the next 3. So this is 4 is around research integrity and ethical conduct, which covers a lot of the core kind of principles that we have for our research already, things like informed consent, open science, equality, diversity, and inclusion considerations, but thinking about how these are influenced by using AI within our work. Responsible development and deployment calls for the need to rigorously validate and openly report how models are trained, how they are performing, and how they are impacting our research workflows and our outputs. And then finally, we have training, education, and interdisciplinary collaboration, which are going to be really core building blocks that responsible and effective AI use needs, because ongoing critical AI literacy will be needed, and this will constantly evolve as these tools evolve as well. If we go to the next slide, though, before we move on to the next stances, we just want to point out, as we do in the statement, that while there is emerging consensus on these principles themselves, the hard part is translating them into what researchers actually do in their day-to-day work or week to week. And that depends not just on researchers' awareness of these principles, but on their capability, so also their skills to actually do these in practice, on the opportunity presented to them through institutional support, the tools available to them, the time that they have, as well as their motivation, so their beliefs around generative AI, social norms within their lab groups, etc. So to support that deliberation, the statement does include a decision aid, and we've kind of summarized this here. This was adapted from the Responsible Research and Innovation Framework, and really just prompts researchers around a lot of questions that they might want to ask before integrating AI, such as the potential benefits and risks, reflecting on the conflicts and consequences, and engaging with stakeholders all before they act. AI adoption should be viewed as an ongoing process of deliberation rather than a one-time decision. And if we can move on to the next slide, the next 2 stances 2 and 3, cover really important aspects of oversight and evaluation, where stance 2 goes a bit more into the human in the loop, saying AI can assist but not replace researchers. The researchers must take responsibility for their decisions about AI use. Models often lack training data that accurately reflects the complexity of the behavior and its influences, including the local and global cultural contexts that behavioral research actually cares about. And so researchers need to understand these risks within their specific use cases, evaluate whether the processes and outputs can be trusted, and also to ensure that core research competencies, so our subject expertise, our creativity, the methodological diversity, and the critical thinking must be preserved to ensure that AI improves rather than diminishes research quality within our field. Stance 3 covers rigorous evaluation being essential, so AI adoption needs to be accompanied by rigorous evaluation, including comparison against traditional methods. Evaluation must extend beyond model performance, which is often kind of one of the core discussions, to include methodological concerns, societal impacts, and equity, diversity, and inclusion considerations. Benefits should be demonstrated through rigorous pilot studies before widespread implementation. And if we go to the next slide, the final stance is that coordinated stakeholder action is needed. This is because all stakeholders share responsibility for enabling responsible and effective AI adoption. This is research networks, institutions, funders, journals. They shape the context in which we as individual researchers use AI. So this goes beyond them developing regulations, policy, and guidance to think about the practical tools and resources that researchers need to detect bias, to access alternatives to expensive commercial models, to validate methods for using and collecting and using diverse training data. And that work has to be coordinated across the system. And I'll hand back to Maggie to talk about the recommendations for the different stakeholder groups we have based on these stats.
Okay, thank you very much, Amy. So this brings us to recommendations organized by stakeholder. We have 6 groups here, institutionally, research generating institutions, funders, publication outlets, and behavioral research networks and communities. And then individually, we have researchers and research users. Next slide, please. So first, research generating institutions, including universities and independent research organizations, should develop AI policies through consultation with researchers, ethics committees, legal advisors, and governance specialists. They should ensure that any internal models or contracts with commercial models can let researchers actually follow those principles, those policies. And then training provision should be tailored to different career stages and hopefully to the specific context of behavior research. And ethics committees should be equipped with AI-specific expertise to evaluate what researchers bring them. Next slide. As for funders, they should set clear expectations for AI use, covering transparency, authorship criteria, originality, and data protection. And they should also provide dedicated funding to develop the skills, infrastructure, and processes needed to incorporate AI into research. Funding should also span diverse populations, context, and methodologies, not just what looks novel. And funders, finally, should support parallel studies with AI and without to understand how AI changes research findings. Next slide. As for publication outlets, like journals, they should set clear expectations, again, for AI use for both authors and reviewers. They should develop evolving guidance, since the field of AI is rapidly evolving as well, for reviewers on evaluating AI-assisted research. And they should also put measures into place to identify AI-generated reviewer comments and unauthorized use of AI tools during the peer review itself. Next slide. And behavioral research networks and communities should facilitate collaborative processes to develop consensus standards, addressing domain-specific considerations through multi-stakeholder consultation. They should build knowledge-sharing mechanisms through forums, workshops, and conferences. And they should also support rigorous development and testing of AI methods for behavior research. Next slide, please. And finally, recommendations for individuals. For researchers, before using AI, we recommend using the decision aid that Amy just mentioned, or other decision aids to decide whether and how to use AI, not because of hype or to cut corners. And then researchers should document and disclose clearly the intentional substantial AI use, including tools, version numbers, prompts, and validation methods in the research process. And then do evaluate effectiveness of the use of AI in the research process, including any problems encountered and or any successes cases. And also share what you learn through publications, presentations, and online forums, etc. Do engage in ongoing professional training to build AI literacy relevant to your research methods and the domain. And also critically evaluate all AI-generated content, because researchers remain fully accountable and responsible for all research outputs. And finally, research users are the people who consume and apply behavior research in policies or in practice. And they should develop an basic understanding of how AI is being applied and what this means for evidence quality. And then they should also expect and request clear disclosure if necessary. And they should consult guidance to assess whether AI use was appropriate or not. Next slide. So that was an overview of our UK AI statement. And the gap between responsible and irresponsible AI use is what made this necessary. And your feedback is what will keep it credible. So where does it land well? Where does it fall short? In particular, we have three major questions. The four stances. Do you think they are the right four? And then regarding the recommendations, do you think they are actionable in your context? And then what gaps remain? They can be sector-specific challenges, anything else missing? And you can leave feedback via the Padlet on the screen by scanning the QR code, or we will also leave a link in the chat box. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And let's leave that slide on for a few minutes. I would really encourage you to download the Padlet. It's a very, I don't know if you've used it before, but it's a very good tool for gathering people's views. And you can just have that open on your phone during the rest of the session. And as thoughts come to you, you can just add to what you have there. So I'd like to just take this opportunity to thank Amy and Maggie very much for their incredible work, pulling together what was a huge amount of material that they uncovered. And they're currently writing part of this up for publication. So we'll share that as and when we get to it. So I think that's enough time for everybody to have downloaded the Padlet. We can always put it back on again later if anybody hasn't got it. And so with thanks to both of you for a very clear presentation, I'd like to now hand over to Dr. Marika Shamuris, who is going to talk about the organisation she works for, Busara, and how they've built on some of this work and developed a tool for showing or a checklist really as to how transparent AI is in terms of research. So very necessary. Really look forward to it. Thank you, Marika.
Great, thank you so much for being here. Sorry, my internet dropped at an inopportune moment, so I'm on my phone now, and I hope you can hear me okay. I wanted to give a brief overview of really how we have thought at Busara about some of these challenges that you have just heard about. And we call this the CIFA tool, and it's born from the fact that I was very lucky to be part of the steering group that developed, supported on the statement, really. All the credit goes to the BR UK team. But I want to talk you through very briefly what we've done here. And I want to start that by saying that this is an open source tool that is very flexible, very adjustable to the needs of your organizations, to your design needs. I mean, anything that you would like it to be, because we're not thinking of this as we do very much share this sentiment of needing to help to build community and consensus around some of the practices. So let me tell you what you're seeing on the screen, which is the CIFA figure, as we call it. And CIFA, even though we made a fancy acronym as well, really is a Swahili/Arabic word because Busara is headquartered in Kenya. And it just means the characteristics or the attributes of something or the reputation of something. And we thought that was a really useful way of thinking about this without judgment in AI declaration, but actually in trying to understand the attributes of a piece of research. And we heard before that it's very often difficult to know what researchers really do and use. And one reason for that is, of course, that in a lot of AI practices, maybe not the great practices, processes are flattened. Processes are becoming unnuanced. And so we wanted to take sorry, I have some confusion here with my two different microphones. So we wanted to take a very established framework, which is the credit framework, which is actually suggested also by BR UK, to say, well, let's unflatten the processes again. Let's break down all of these steps to say where actually in these steps is AI being used, because it helps a lot with the reflection that we think is absolutely necessary, and it helps people think through what they've actually been doing, and it helps people to keep track. The other problem that we've heard earlier is that there's really quite a lot of challenge in the precision of wording. It's very difficult sometimes to know what people are talking about. And we've kind of identified that as a little bit of a barrier in people actually declaring their AI usage, because it's hard to know at this point in time, what can I do to be really exact with what I'm saying? And precision is a little bit dangerous. It's not really clear at this point in time what constitutes extensive AI usage, for example. So we made this rather broad tool with only 3 categories: no AI use, a little bit of AI use, extensive AI use. And it's much more an invitation to invite reflection. And this figure that is produced, there's something else that I'll show you in a second, really follows this idea, which some of the literature also calls for, to have some sort of watermark attached to statement, to publications, some sort of expression that there is a commitment to really reflecting on AI use. And if we can go to the next slide, I can show you what it actually looks like when you open the tool, which again is open source. You can adjust it, but it's also very flexible, usable the way it is, where you basically just get asked to run through a set of the credit role contributors roles at your contributors, declare the extent of AI use, and then follow all the best practices that we've just heard about. How exactly was AI used? In what way? Is there an audit trail that can be shared? And with what tool and service? And because this is the credit taxonomy is really required by many, if not most, academic journals now, people have to fill this in anyway. And they can start the CIFA at the beginning of a research process. They can save it. Sometimes even filling out the credit taxonomy can be really hard if the research has been running for 5 years. So we were trying to make that easier. And after some feedback, we also have an extra function there where you can also set up your own taxonomy if credit does not work for you. Credit also, of course, roles can be skipped and so on. So if not everything is relevant, it's still very workable. And you can then download the table just as a table and design it however you would like it, or you can download it as a figure. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So this could be what it looks like if you download your whole kind of CIFA figure, but again, design very flexible, very adjustable. This is the CIFA that my co-author Angie Saleh and I made for the background document that we developed to explain a little bit of the philosophy of the CIFA, how it's used, situated in a lot of the discussions that happen, and show where it also really docks on to the BR UK statement. So if we go to the next slide, please. And I want to stress this again. This is a community tool. We would love it if it becomes a rigorous and yet maybe a little bit playful way in the showing of the CIFA figure that can build social norms around doing this, because we've always had, well, generally feedback has also had questions, which is, well, but won't it take a lot of time to do this? To which I would say, well, many times we need to do the credit taxonomy anyway. And plus, all that time used by using AI might be put to good use in just doing a bit of reflection for community. And then people ask, oh, but what if people are not honest? I was like, again, I understand that might be in the time of social norms developing a problem, but that's also why it's a serious, rigorous, and yet also a little bit of a playful approach. The figure is not supposed to be an exact measuring tool. So these are some ideas on which we're working, and much like with the statement, we would love feedback. Does this work? Can it be adjusted, make even better? But again, it's open for everyone to use. It's open source. You can take the code, you can work with it, you can adjust it. And really, it's just meant to make the process of declaring a little bit more streamlined, and then maybe have an element to it that also shows some of the broader thinking and shared values that underpin also the BR UK statement. So I'd love to hear feedback on that as well. Thank you.
Veronica, thank you very much. such a useful tool, and we'll certainly put it into the BR UK AI repository we have of resources, because I think this will be make life simpler and achieves a lot of the things that we've talked about in the statement. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. And the slides of this talk will be available afterwards, so people who want to go back and look at it in more detail and remind themselves of anything, the slides will be there. Okay, so we didn't have direct Q&As on the statement beforehand. So if I can ask all the panelists to join us again, and please, all of you who would like to switch your cameras on, it would be lovely to see you. This is the first time we've actually run a seminar or a webinar where you can have your cameras on and you can ask questions yourselves. So it's a bit experimental for us. Because we have large numbers at these, we generally think it's easier to deal with chat online, but obviously it's much less interactive. And because the main point of the session is to hear from you, get your feedback, your ideas that can feed into developing the final version of the statement, we thought it would be good to try this out. You are very welcome to put anything into the chat, put any questions into the chat, but also just do ask any questions that you'd like to, or any comments, or are there any issues that you think are important that you haven't heard discussed yet by the presentations? So we have between 70 and 80 of you, so hopefully some of you will be interested in contributing. And if nobody wants to jump in first, I might ask the panelists, having listened to the statement and having listened to the tool that Marika shared, do you have any further reflections? Now, hold that question, hold that thought, because we do have a question from Ian Keller, or a comment. Ian, thanks very much for getting the ball rolling.
You're welcome. I think the first kind of reflection I've had is that I think the statements on the whole are entirely defensible, but I think that the range of uses that you've collapsed makes it hard to see what people using AI at very different levels should do. So, you've said that you've used Manus and Perplexity. That's a very different thing than kind of an ungrounded prompt. I use harnesses widely. I've got a set of verified pipelines that I measure outputs against. The idea that things like hallucinated references should exist when there are MCP servers that you can use to validate against PubMed means that there's such a range of use. It's really hard for people doing the best work to see themselves in a big glom of Gen AI. And so I wondered, had you any thoughts of kind of separating out recommendations by some kind of taxonomy of use?
Interesting, very interesting. Maggie and Amy, I'll let you have first bite of this cherry and then hand over to the rest of the panels. But a great point, Ian. Thank you for it.
Yeah, so I think I'll say one quick thing. I think one of the things we did want to have, which didn't end up in this current statement, was potentially a bank, whether it's in the statement or in another resource, of good examples of good practice for the more specific use cases and practices. But as you said, that's such a massive landscape. So for the first go of the statement, we really wanted something that tried to capture at a high level principles. So I think it's definitely something we've considered and we moved away from slightly, but it would be interesting to get the rest of the panel's discussion on how we might deal with that moving forward and having more guidance. And then I do think that the one thing about research networks or research communities establishing more specific guidance, I think is a really important recommendation. We do see people like Cochrane coming out with recommendations on evidence synthesis and literature reviews, and we really encourage that and think that's such a really important step in moving us forward. we need the more specific stuff as well, like you said. So those are the two things that came to mind when you were saying that, and I don't know if that fully addresses it, but just that it was on our radar a little, and we might be able to address it better.
Thanks. Maggie, did you want to add to that?
No, just to reiterate that I agree with what Amy said, that initially this statement was thought of as a brief and concise referable statement which will be later on supplemented by could be supplemented by a lot of many different additional materials like what you mentioned about like the taxonomy of different use cases. That's actually in our vision. Thank you.
Thanks. Any of the other panelists want to add?
Yeah, just I thought it was very well made point, Ian. I think with the document, it reminds me of COVID. You know, you've got this massively evolving situation where ethical norms are really sort of hazy in a lot of areas of practice at the moment. So I think that's the other thing about this document. It's really trying to put down in fairly blunt form, a set of minimum statements that should act as a sort of a norm for how you should engage with these. But I think the way you phrased it, and exactly right, across AI and across research, there's clearly going to be evolving, and we're seeing them evolving good use of these technologies. But also there you can see already. I mean, there's papers being retracted. There's clearly like implausible productivity emerging in some types of researchers, etc. So the document is partly aimed at that as well as trying to shape good practice.
Thanks, Liam.
Yeah, if I can jump in, it is a really useful point, and I think it helps to address, I think, something that throughout this process I've sort of felt is a challenge, which is that there's a lot of even with this relatively briefish statement, there's a lot of stuff in there for people to get their heads around and if we want to make it actionable, I think we have to simplify some of it for people, or to help them to see which bits are going to be most relevant for them. And I think the idea of collecting sort of template workflows and template use cases that people could say, oh well, this is the kind of thing that I do, right? Okay. This gives me now a clear idea of what I need to do in that situation. I think that might, that would be a really great next step. And I also think that, in some of the, if we think about where the major pitfalls lie, where the problems lie. I mean, as you say, Ian, I mean, no one should be experiencing hallucinations at this point. No, it should never happen. Not just because you could use it, as you say, you could use MCPs to check, to link up with other software. You could just look it up and make sure, that you're not. So there's certain really basic things that you could say, right, you should never do that. That's kind of almost like research malpractice, And then there's other things that sort of on the grade that, can take you from that really basic level all the way through to something which is more refined and where you're optimizing your use. And so, these sort of template workflows could, including the sort of stuff that you use, which I think will be evolving rapidly as the tools, evolve as well. I think will be, if we could sort of almost crowd source some of it, it would be, potentially very useful. Great idea.
Thanks. And I mean, we really do stress the responsibility of the human for everything. And, just as social and behavioural scientists are hopefully extremely well trained in checking and validating the data that we use. So we need to do the same with any output from AI, especially because there's more of a black box going on for most of us than there is for data analysis. Marika.
Yes, can you hear me okay? Sorry, I had a complete tech meltdown. I wanted to come in because I was just seeing also Rebecca's and Lisa's question in the chat on would it be okay to use LLMs for qualitative research to speed things up a little from Rebecca, and will there be guidance on using, for example, synthetic participants? And I find I think wonderful questions to maybe push something that Robert also just said, which is social scientists do have a particular set of tools to approach their questions of how to use AI. So for me, for example, the question on is it okay to use something to speed up the process a little is not a very helpful way of thinking about the problem. It's much more helpful to say, well, why is something in my categorization process, as in my qualitative research, a pain point to me? What problem does it pose to me? And really, does AI provide the best solution to solve it? And if the problem is as straightforward as I do not have enough time to actually do this research, then maybe the problem is elsewhere than in saying, can I use the LLM? And I think these are wonderful social scientific tools to really say, well, what am I tackling here? What am I actually grappling with? We at Bosara, as I mentioned before, we do most of our research work in Africa, and my colleague Angie Sully is actually on the meeting, who runs our behavioral research unit. We get approached a lot about synthetic participants, and I think very clearly there's, of course, not a clear answer to this at the moment. And it's a fantastic area where we can gather more information and research on what it does and what it doesn't do. And from our perspective, even though there are real concerns about the quality of data that these might generate, we don't know yet. We do work in areas where there's a lot of inaccessible populations, or populations who really can't be researched. LGBTQ communities in Uganda cannot take the danger of what it means to be participants in research. So could it solve that problem? So I would always stress this question of what problem am I actually facing here, and can AI help me in addressing this? Social scientists can do this. Thank you.
Thanks. So I think as hopefully most people on this webinar know, Behavioural Research UK was very much set up to provide leadership, but also to provide different kinds of forum for behavioural researchers to come together and think about and develop methodologies and issues confronting us, etc. So if Ian and others, if anybody would like to get involved in taking this work forward beyond the statement, please do get in touch. Behavioural Research UK has an email you can get in touch, or indeed with any of us directly, because we can enable other work. And in fact, just to give a bit more of the history of this, we have an international scientific advisory board that meets once or twice a year to advise BR UK. And both Marika and Liam are on it. And Liam actually, I think, raised the issue about AI. And so this work very much just developed from that conversation. And we'd be very happy to take it forward. We've had 3 or 4 other webinars on various aspects of AI. So, please do look those up. And the issue of qualitative research has come up. So we've addressed it to some extent. But if people would like a webinar just on the use of AI in qualitative research, I suggest just in the chat say qualitative, yes, please, or something. And we can get an idea of how much interest there is and do that. Now, one of the questions that I noticed was saying, or pointing to the fact that we're just talking about generative AI here. And there are very important other kinds of AI, such as machine learning, that, again, we use in our research a lot. And what's the rationale for not including it? Are we going to do something similar for other AI? And we did discuss this, and we do have a webinar on what we called analytic AI as opposed to generative AI, and presenting how that's being used in behavioural research. But Amy, Maggie, Robert, I know you've thought quite a lot about non-generative AI and issues around this in relation to that. Do any of you want to say anything on that particular topic?
I'm happy to chip in. I think that for the foreseeable future, generative AI is not going to be providing us with reliable quantitative estimations and predictions of things. I think that's where the more traditional AI, which you can think of as kind of like an extension of statistical modeling, is going to be really important and continue to be really important. And so much of the work that we do, certainly at population level, does involve quantitative estimation. But I think a lot of the advances that we can make in the way that we interact with generative AI are also potentially valuable when it comes to working with the analytical AI. So if you're doing machine learning to make quantitative predictions, for example, really good idea, I think, we think, to use ontologies as a basis for your variables and make your so that you've got a clear semantic structure with the machine learning. So I would just give you a really sort of crude example. If you've got studies which have nicotine patches or something like that as one of their interventions, then it's helpful in the ontology to know that nicotine patches are a form of nicotine replacement therapy, which is a form of pharmacotherapy. Because different studies will focus on different things, and at some point you need to be able to match the studies up when you're making these predictions. So, what are you going to talk about? Talk about NRT, or you could talk about fast-acting NRT. You could talk about nicotine patches or whatever. That's just one sort of crude example with the semantic structure that you get from ontologies. You can get much better value out of your analytical AI. But in addition to that, I think there's people working now on, and I think Jana Hastings is working on this, as to how we can use ontologies to get better value out of our generative AI as well, because it gives much better clarity or greater clarity for the machine to be able to figure out what it is you're talking about, and therefore answer the questions that you want it to be able to answer. So I think that I probably at some point in the future we'll get a sort of merging of the two in some way. But for now, I think it really is going to be generative AI. They're essentially token-based prediction models, and therefore they're going to be helping you to figure out make statements and form propositions about things. Whereas we're going to absolutely, for the moment, rely on statistical and machine learning techniques with ontologies and other things to do the quantitative modeling and prediction.
Thanks, Robert. And I noticed that people are asking lots of questions on chat and not using the direct hand up to come in to say anything, which is absolutely fine. But can I ask panelists to look at the chat and pick out any questions they would like to address from it? I've got one in front of me here from Simon Bacon. Hello, Simon, from Canada. I don't think I heard much about the potential use of explainable AI, especially from an equity and justice lens. Was there any consideration given to highlighting the use of explainable AI? Very good point, and I think we should definitely strengthen that in the statement. And just to give an example from behavioural research about this issue, from my own personal experience, I was the lead investigator on, I think it turned out to be about a 5 or 6 year project, the Human Behaviour Change Project, which was a partnership between behavioural scientists and computer scientists. And we said right from the outset that we wanted explainable AI. This was a project that was seeking to be able to find literature and integrate literature much more effectively using structures, ontologies, as Robert mentioned. And so we partnered with, maybe I shouldn't say who we partnered with. We partnered with a very well-known large AI company. And they actually, having said that, yes, we can, with ontologies, we can do all this work, so it'll be open and transparent. It was a Wellcome funded, so Wellcome does insist on that also, thank goodness. It was too difficult. So then they went down the vector route, which isn't explainable. It's back to black box. And so although, they got a few nice papers out of it, from our point of view, it wasn't what we wanted. And Dr. Jana Hastings, who Robert mentioned, became involved. She's both a computer scientist and an ontologist and has a bit of behavioural science in her background, a very valuable person. She developed a prediction tool which was completely transparent. It had rules, very clear rules, prediction rules, and used machine learning. And that's, if you look at humanbehaviourchange.org, www, you'll find that work. But that's an example where we have to be very careful if we really want to get explainable AI. And obviously, vast majority of us using generative AI has got no idea what's going on in that black box. Liam, you've got your hand up.
I just wanted to come back on the apologies. I just slightly, my screens are a bit, so I haven't got the name, but I'll get them in a second. But somebody made the really good comment about the inequality in access to the technologies. And I mean, I think it's one for a large webinar in itself, in that if you think of the history of how we incorporated journals, for example, into academia, like at some point we just took a massive wrong turn and ended up with a model that we got stuck with. There's something potentially similar unfolding with, and you can see it with Claude, for example, which, you can see some really potentially useful applications of it. But if you get into a model where, you have to have vast amounts of money being spent on subscriptions, and you're potentially not able to verify or even participate in an academic discussion without having those subscriptions, we have to very rapidly, before this scale, start having these debates. And I appreciate that there's specific AI engineering expertise in these debates, but these are now big questions about the environment of academia, who participates in it, how it's done. And I feel that conversation is very impoverished at the moment. And this is one step towards it, but I think that's a really good point. And final thing I'll say, I feel a bit guilty because part of me thinks, even participating in this, we're slightly pushing the narrative that this is an inevitable technological advancement. And I think I've even said some things in this webinar that might point to that, but it's not at all. You know what I mean? Some of these technologies are yet to be proven, and certainly the extent to which we should scale them, normalize them, accept claims from them, etc., in my view, is still completely wide open, and should certainly take into account what the commenter said about epistemic access.
Thanks, Liam. Marika.
Yeah, just to build on that, Liam, thanks for picking up that point. That's a very acute question, the question of inequality and access. But for the work that we do in Asia and Latin America and Africa, but it's more than inequality of access. And this is also where I think this conversation gets really interesting, because it's also an invitation to be really, really interdisciplinary and to say, actually, can we bring some historians in and explain to us how, for example, Africa has traditionally been the resource from which skills for everyone else were extracted, which is what we're seeing right now, right? We have Kenya is very much in the midst of all of this, where data workers are the people evaluating data for specific models and so on without much benefit. What's really fantastic is that on the back of this, there is a lot of development in the various countries. There's fantastic initiatives on what's called decentralized AI, which asks these questions that you just said. What if we assume that this is not inevitable, that there's not an inevitable model that we all will adhere to? What would it look like if actually AI could become more diverse and more pluralistic and more equitable, really? So I think a wonderful conversation to have, but really also an invitation to work on some of these questions in a really, really, really interdisciplinary way, and say, what are some of the learnings that we've had in the past from history, from international development studies, all these kind of things. Thank you.
Thanks, Marika. Simon, in almost real person.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Apologies, I'm running around in the background. One of the things that this made me think about, the last couple of comments, was this question of data sovereignty as well. And so so there's only 4 countries in the world that have foundational models. So there's China, the US, France, and Canada. and where you're pulling from and what that means in terms of what you put into the system as much as what you take out of it is something maybe to think about too. And I was thinking about that from the equity and justice piece. And certainly, here in Canada, the question around the use of AI with Indigenous people, this becomes a really important aspect. And so as I say, I was running around a little bit, so I didn't catch everything in the presentation, but I'm just wondering how much that is explicitly touched upon in the context of the statement. So yeah, just that was more of a bit of information, but also a question sort of more broadly.
Yeah. Amy.
Yeah, just to come in, I think that we try to touch some of these things in the framing. I think this would be most relevant to the context piece at the start, where we kind of set up what's informing our stances and our recommendations. But I definitely think off the back of these discussions, we can review that and make sure that, given the short space we have, we've allowed for enough nuance, because I think we just touch on them very high level, so definitely not in the depth. And I think some of these core issues may not be covered as much. So yeah, just a thank you for this conversation from everyone. I'm listening intently, and I think we do need to maybe reshape some of that framing in the initial section off the back of these discussions.
Yeah, I think the equity and justice bit could be strengthened. I mean, one of the issues is Behavioural Research UK statement, but really, so we're not going to a lot about global issues. But on the other hand, this statement should be universal. So I think we do need to think more about that. If there's nobody else just wanting to jump in on screen, Vivi Antonopoulou has raised a question which we don't touch on in the statement. I'll read it out, and we can have a think about whether we do want to get into this issue. Maybe we should. Right, without debating the very real benefits AI tools bring, while we hear a lot about the need for accountability and checks in place, one thing we need to hear more about is perhaps de-skilling. The risk that after years of delegating to AI, we may no longer have the expertise to meaningfully evaluate its outputs. What are your thoughts on how best to safeguard this? I mean, I think this is a fascinating question. I think we could have a whole session on this. And I think I have two bits of my mind saying different things to each other. So one is, I remember when I was, as an undergraduate, taught statistics, I was made to do a chi-square calculation by hand because I was told that would make me understand chi-square more. And it seriously did not. It made me really not want to look at chi-square again. Whereas if there'd been much more about the principles and, a lot of the constraints, safeguarding, etc., right, chi-square, I would probably have been much more interested and learned a lot more. So I think we need to think about what are we using technologies for, and is it posing this kind of risk? I mean, now with chi-square, at least I did sort of tabulation, etc., etc. Now some people just press a button and don't really have that. So it's not a new problem. I think the extent to which we need to understand the nuts and bolts and under the bonnet, although now maybe it's under the boot when it's an electric car, what's going on. But the other thing, I've heard a lot of people talk about this concern, and especially in training, we need to think about the next generation and how can we ensure that AI is an adjunct to our brains? Because there are some things that AI can do so much better than us, but some things that we can do than only we can do at the moment that AI can't do. And how do we work with these two together so that people don't think about just replacing the kind of critical, evaluative, creative aspects of human intellects? So huge topic. Also, if anybody on the call, because you can just come in, you can comment on any of the questions. It's, very happy to have this as a broader conversation, not just backs and forwards between you and the panel. So open invitation to everyone. Meanwhile, Liam.
Yeah, just on that point, Darren Asamoglu, who's a professor here at LSE, he paints a very gloomy picture of sort of knowledge collapse in disciplines coming from a sort of variant of this issue that all of us now, with the best intention, you might wish to continue your skills, but of course it becomes increasingly easier. And then over time, that sort of crowds out, the desire and capacity to acquire these skills. So in his models, you end up in whole areas just collapse essentially into, uh, you know, non-human activities. But I think from the point of view, just pragmatically about behavioral research, and certainly in our programs, we um, we have to formulate it better, but we have to insist on um, accountability, training, capacity to know that you're not plagiarizing, capacity to know within your team that you're not making fundamental mistakes. And I think these are covered in the document. I don't know where it's going to be in 5 years or 10 years time, but at the moment, I think it is unethical to present a document as a team that you can't defend with the expertise that you have, and I know there's a debate on Twitter about whether you should read your citations, but certainly, like, you should be moving in that direction. Certainly, like, there should be people on the team. I think that's the spirit of the document, but I fear increasingly that could become a public good issue rather than an actual document quality issue. Like, it may be something that we're preserving because you need to preserve it, and that's a very difficult thing to do, right? Because it then becomes optimal for people not to adhere to the norm. It's going to be an interesting one in the next couple of years, but certainly I think we should be erring on the side of accountability, skill preservation, comprehension, sentience, etc. But it's, you could be gloomy actually if you look at some of the papers coming out in that at the moment.
Thanks, Liam. Amy and Maggie, are you looking at the Padlet, and are there issues coming into the Padlet, or is it something you can just look at the end?
Sorry, I've had so many tabs up I've been mostly looking at the chat just now. I think we initially thought that the Padlet would be something we would look at after, but
Okay.
More like for commentary and feedback rather than questions. But if I'll maybe have a look at that now in the background while you continue and just make sure we haven't
just
any questions.
in case there are other issues that people have put in there that haven't put in the chat or raised here. Marika's raised a question, but it'd be quite nice to go further than the panel. Anything else that people think we haven't covered in the statement, or you'd like us to talk about now in terms of developing the statement? No? I hope that's because you think it's kind of good and comprehensive. But who knows? You can put your evaluative statements also on Padlet or here. Okay, I'm going to read out Marika's. Why don't I read out Marika's question? How do you feel about the issue of honesty, time, and precision when it comes to AI contribution statement? How can we build a social norm around honesty, making the time of doing it worthwhile? And how much should we be guided by the highest level of precision in declaring AI use, i.e. down to breaking down a piece of research into percentages? So I think there's two things there, aren't there? And I think they're very different things. One is honesty, and I don't think anybody would advocate anything other than total honesty. The other's precision, but there's also maybe what you're also talking about is detail, which is different than precision. I mean, precision, if we're not precise, then we're not scientists, in my view. I think this is a whole other issue. Maybe we'll have a webinar on this next year, but so important that behavioural research becomes more precise in what it's doing. But I think your question, Marika, is more about detail. When one's declaring, like in the tool that you have, how much detail does one put in there? Now, I think that really that can be covered by the very good practice we now have of protocols, written, published, open protocols of what research is going to be done, but also online appendices and this is why Open Science Framework is such an excellent platform, where you can have all the detail of everything you've done on there for people to interrogate. Because I think, what we need to be able to preserve is the ability for somebody to be able to say, okay, that was your question. These were your methods. This is what you say your finding is, and then what the meaning and implications of that finding is. But if we go back to this is what your finding is, then we need to have enough detail in order to allow people to say, is that finding justified by the data and the methods? And I often say to students, when they're writing up methods, it's about, being replicable. Could somebody do this? I say, think about it like a recipe. You need enough detail to make a fine meal. And so you do need to say quantities and time scale and et cetera, et cetera. You don't need to go into the chemical formulae of plain flour, for example. So I think it has to be a judgment, in terms of communicating and what the task at hand is. So that's my own answer to that one. Did anybody else have any other thoughts on that or issue or tangential issues? Great. We have Hannah McCarthy. Thank you.
Hi. I thought I'd jump in since you kept asking us all.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
It's a fabulous conversation and really, really helpful. I think really just on what you were just saying about the degree of detail that you're able to share, it's just a comment really about my own experience. And I suppose really a question about going forward. I'm hopefully finally going to do my Viva in September this year after many, many years. And thank you. And one of the things that I'm concerned about is defending the use of AI in some of my later papers, because although I can say at a high level why it was used and what the methods were and some of the stats tests and visualizations that I used, because it was very early days and there was really not any guidance, and I just dived into iterative kind of exploration, there's a lot of kind of prompt trails, if you like, that I just simply couldn't recreate. And I think that I'm sure there's lots of people in a similar situation to me, in that with the best will in the world, we want to have that transparency and have gone through and checked the outputs. But a lot of that has been lost really in the sands of time. What would be your advice and thoughts around that kind of situation?
It's a really good point. In terms of your own PhD, obviously all you can do is honestly report that this was at a time when you didn't have that facility. But I think this is an issue for all of us at the moment. I mean, if it were possible to set things up so that just an automatic trail on one's computer that one could just, maybe there is such a function, extract and download and have there, that would be something. But that's overkill in terms of detail. I think one does need that degree of detail in case something goes wrong. In case, for example, somebody challenges you and you need to show something, or somebody just wants to get into the weeds and discovers a problem. Should be able to do that. But what one doesn't want to do is prevent good communication for the great majority of people who are never going to get into those weeds, but do want to get an idea of, what is in the garden, so to speak. So I think one has to judge the level of detail that is appropriate for the audience and for the task. And like everything, I think we need to be very explicit. We should be more explicit about all our judgments about why we chose this statistical test, why we did this, why we tend not to. And so I think this is an example of where you just say, I've selected this level of detail for these reasons, and make the case. And, with all our papers, we always address the limitations of what we've done. Maybe one of the things is, in a report, we say this report is at this level, but the details elsewhere. And again, Open Science Framework is just an ideal platform for that.
Great, thank you.
But I don't, to be honest, I don't know. I mean, I saw Ian's was nodding, and I see Robert's got his hand, so I'll pass over in a minute. I would say I'm guilty of the same thing. I mean, for me, I'm not doing sort of a lot of what I'm doing at the moment is maybe bringing research together and thought pieces, things like that. But I don't keep an audit trail. I do lots of prompts. I go to different platforms because I kind of want to cross-validate across platforms. I don't keep a record of all of that.
It's more like a conversation, isn't it? More like a dialogue sometimes, and so you don't necessarily keep it all. But Well, thank you,
Robert.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I think as the field evolves very rapidly, it's quite likely that what will be perceived as the demands of good practice will continue to evolve. And I think it would be really helpful then if this document, taking that on board, were to make a positive statement which you could use in your PhD or whatever, or someone could use in a paper, a sort of a permissive statement saying, this doesn't make it a drop dead. Oh well, we're going to disregard these because or these findings because of X. Because I think we can say with some degree of confidence that there will be people who would do that. There will be journals who would do that. There'll be examiners who will do that. You have a spectrum of sort of sort of zealots in one direction and sort of permissives on the other side. And I think we want to strike the right balance. So I think it would be good if there was something you could cite in terms of a guidance document which took a sort of a reasonable perspective on this and that you could use. The other thing that I think has come out of this discussion is, which I think also is important, is that there's a massive risk here with AI being able to produce so much stuff at such speed with such volume that we're just there's just going to be too much stuff. And humans couldn't look at it, so we'll have to get the AI to look at it, and then why don't we just get the humans out the loop altogether and just let the AI talk to each other? But so it's not so. I think we're going to need to find some way of prioritizing the stuff that the information that we foreground, and as Susan says, you keep the other stuff for for an audit trail in case something goes horribly wrong. And obviously in high risk scenarios in aviation and so on, that makes sense because think when things go wrong there, they can go horribly wrong, and very visibly horribly wrong. When our stuff goes horribly wrong, it doesn't usually go visibly horribly wrong, because you won't know for 10 years whether or 5 years or whatever, whether a behavioral science recommendation turned out to be a really bad one and killed 20 million people. Perhaps that's an exaggeration, but there's a lot of them about these recommendations that actually are more harmful than good. So I think bringing in some sort of triage type approach to the kinds of information that is kept would also be a potentially useful adjunct.
Thanks. Ian, you mentioned in the chat that you've built a logging skill to keep a record of your workflow. It'd be really helpful if you shared something about that with us.
Yeah, obviously, and obviously its utility depends on the capabilities of the harness that you're using. So the harnesses that I use have that capacity to keep a log, and it was just that it seemed like an obvious thing to do because
when you say harness, what do you mean by harness?
So like so I use Hermes Agent, OpenClaw, Claude Code. So it just depends which harness you've got and what capacity it has over and above the underlying LLM that you route into it. And I use OpenRouter, so I can flip between models whenever I want, primarily to save money. But
Well, that's very honest.
I hope we don't find at some point in the not too distant future that all your emails and files have been deleted by your OpenClaw.
My Hermes agent surfaced 4,500 emails helpfully at the weekend.
Oh my goodness. I mentioned previously that BI UK on the website has got an AI resource repository where we're trying to keep updated anything we hear about. So, Ian, it'd be really helpful if you're able to do some bullet points or a paragraph or two just about what you've talked about here that we could maybe share. Because, I said, what's a harness? That's a new word for me in this context, and I use AI quite a lot. So having something in a form that people could follow and do would be really helpful. Okay. Right. Some people are saying great discussion. Thanks. I have to go. Are there any final questions or comments that people would like us to consider in producing this final version?
I just have a thought, which is, sorry, Amy, which is, I see Edward Pogowski's on the thing. I don't want to put you on the spot, Edward, but you're someone who's kind of like, at the forefront of this. And I was just wondering if you had any, what sort of thoughts you were surfacing as a result of this discussion.
Edward, it'd be great if you could introduce yourself, who you are.
Hello, my name is Edward, and I've been working with Robert, and also attended the summer school for the Center from the Center for the Behavior Change. And I've been working on applying behavior change principles in the educational domain and designing interventions to improve self-regulated learning. And lately, I've been working with the UCL Effective Brain Lab, where they design tool to enhance a web browsing experience by showing labels for web content which appear on the search results. And to be honest, I haven't read the statement yet, and I would need some time to acknowledge myself with this, and I would go back and with my comments, perhaps maybe via email. And yes, and what I heard during the webinar is there is lots of points in this statement, in these recommendations, and it would be really nice to have some maybe brief or executive summary of all of this, and that can be easily digested for maybe non-specialized audience and for the general public and general research community.
Thanks. We tend to do blogs, again, on the BI UK website. So I don't think we have, Amy and Maggie, done a blog on this yet, have we?
No, I think we did one for Methods and Research Centre, but not for BR UK.
Okay, so once this is finalised, we'll definitely do a blog on this. But also we should make sure we've got a good, accessible executive summary. I think one of the reasons there's been great input, but a lot of people have been listening rather than participating. My guess is because a lot of people haven't read the statement yet. So in a way, I think this is going to be very helpful for framing the reading and the critical reviewing of the document. We do want to produce this to make it as useful and usable by the whole behavioural research community. So please think about that. If there are things that are, could be expressed better or whatever, any criticism, any input is all extremely valuable to us. So the Padlet you've probably got, that's one way, but also there is an email on the website. So if you think about things afterwards and you haven't got the Padlet to put your thoughts onto, please email us. And I suggest we sort of give everybody a week from now. I always think a week's about right. If it's less than a week, often people have very crowded diaries, can't fit it in. If it's more than a week, my experience, if it's not done, then it's not done. So let's have a week from today, and your input would be incredibly valuable. Amy.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say if people have kind of thoughts. I saw someone ask that non-academic stakeholders in the recommendation section 2, such as behavioural consultancies or in-house teams. I think these are great. And we can definitely expand if you don't feel they're captured, but that's the type of stuff. Please put it on the Padlet. This is all the types of feedback that we need to see. And like Susan said, we'll leave that open for a week. You can email us as well, and we can adjust. So if it's not there, we maybe thought about it, but it hasn't gotten in, or we haven't thought about it at all. So get it on the Padlet, with some suggestions of things you think are missing or that would be good for that community as well. And then that will allow us to put that into the next iteration of the draft. So yes, I see some people using the Padlet already, and that's great. So if people want to give more feedback,
feel free to suggest content or edits, rewrites of sections or whatever.
Yes.
This is a meaningful consultation, not a token consultation. So it's a collective joint effort. And also to add, as well as our AI repository, and potentially we could do a session on AI for qualitative research or other issues that come up that we get requests for. We've had a lot of requests for training. So Amy, Maggie, Robert, myself, Jana Hastings, we are putting together a training course in AI for behavioural research. Probably it won't be this autumn. By the time we get everything organised and set up, be in the spring. So do keep an eye. Everything will be announced on the website or on social media. Do keep an eye. We have newsletters too. Sign up for that. I think this is an area where obviously there's massive potential, but why we've said effective and responsible use, it can be used extremely well. It can be used really badly to undermine the quality of the research we do. And we really need to find ways of helping people to avoid that. And also, there are these much bigger societal responsibility questions. The more powerful a technology, the more useful it can be, but also often the more harmful it can be, which is definitely the case here. So in closing, I'd just like to remind people that all our previous webinars on AI and on many other subjects too are available on the BR UK website. Please go and have a look at it. This will be the last webinar until the summer, because I think many of you, and maybe we could have the final slides up, maybe a couple of final slides. We're doing co-hosting with Centre UB a conference in June that I hope, on the 30th of June, University of Birmingham, that I hope many of you will be coming to. I do think we have got, Sancho, are you still there? Do we have some final?
I am here. We don't. The last slide is just our acknowledgements, Susan. So
okay, fine. Okay, so if you are free on the 30th and would like to come to Birmingham and meet lots of us there, do look at the website and sign up for it. The details of the agenda will be on the website very soon. And we've got a couple of excellent keynotes. Professor Ralph Hertwig from the Planck Institute for Human Development in Berlin, and also Paul Taylor, who's a UK government chief scientific advisor for policing and chair of the government's social and behavioural science for emergencies. So both of those people will be speaking. And please do, if you have ideas for webinars you'd like in the future, just email either me personally or the via website. So can I re-thank everybody for their hard work so far in getting the statement to where it is now. Can I thank everybody on the call, either for your contributions over the last hour or your contributions in the future through whatever channel you wish to make it. And can I thank the panelists and Marika for sharing that tool, which, again, just to repeat, we will put it on our AI repository so that other people can see it. But that's exactly the kind of thing that I think will help people to ensure that they behave responsibly as well as effectively in terms of using AI. So it's been a great discussion. Thank you, everyone. There's so much more to think about and do, but I think this is definitely a really helpful step along the way. And for those of you who are in the UK, which I think most of you will be, wishing you the very best for keeping as cool as you can in these very hot times. Thank you. Goodbye all.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Everyone.